Please briefly summarize your industry education, professional background, and current role at AVEVA.
Hi, Todd. Thanks for having me here. Well, I've got a degree in chemical engineering, an MBA. I'm also a chartered professional accountant. I've really started in the industry in engineering consulting many years ago for doing a lot of design build of water and infrastructure type plants and facilities. And later on, moved to work for a regional government where we took care of water, wastewater, parks, housing, air quality. So a lot about sustainability, right? At a regional level, and then moved to OSI Soft. I was there for 15 years, leading our global water business. And then, of course, recently being acquired by Aviva. I've been with Aviva, leading the water and infrastructure businesses.
How does Aviva fit within the infrastructure industry?
Aviva is a global leader in industrial software. We help our customers drive digital transformation and sustainability. We have the ability to connect the power of information with artificial intelligence, provide human insight and context to really enable teams to leverage more of their data, unlock new value, and what we call this is performance intelligence. Our software helps us, and our customers to really simplify the whole design process. So think of it from cradle to grave for any kind of project: design, build, operate, and maintain. We can optimize operations and maintenance, help reduce waste, maximize performance of, for example, water plants and their entire water life cycle. We can predict also outcomes and help provide guidance to enable these teams to accelerate innovation. And of course, now with the whole hybrid workplace, we can do this all remotely as well, like through the cloud, for example. And as part of that, we also have a digital twin that leverages artificial intelligence as well. So it's a very comprehensive portfolio of solutions. We have over 20,000 customers worldwide. And in the water business, we have about 1,400.
So you're chairman of the Smart Water Networks Forum, or SWAN, America's Alliance. What does that do, and what's your role as chairman?
SWAN, the Smart Water Networks Forum. I am the chair for the Americas Alliance, and SWAN is a global digital hub that allows people from around the world in the water industry to really get together and share their ideas. I've always talked about not having to reinvent the wheel, for example. And in the water industry, typically we could be a laggard, and this is a great opportunity to talk all about water from a digital perspective, right? We hear a lot about smart water and all this kind of things. So it's all looking at hardware and software, of course, people and processes as well, and everyone getting together within the business to really share their insights and to network and work together to help move the industry forward.
How can technology keep water systems resilient in the face of climate change? Please provide a few examples.
Todd, we're seeing climate issues around the world. It's getting hard to predict the weather and the patterns. And also there's a lot more extreme weather events. So let me share a couple of examples. I'll use one, JEA, Jacksonville Electric Water Authority. They're in Florida, and each year they face a number of issues with hurricanes and storms. So they have the ability, using our software, to see the entire region that they manage in real time. So they have real-time situational awareness during these hurricane events. Our software is used in their emergency operations center, for example. That way they can see exactly and kind of predict how that hurricane is going to impact and affect them. So it's really about mitigating risk, for example. They now know where to send their crews. Sometimes they're going to get power outages. So for example, they can move around backup generators. They know the fuel levels, so they know how long they can operate, right? And it's really about, being prepared for the next unknown, right? And of course, learning from experiences and from the past. But this really allows JEA to, get people to where they need to be without that guesswork, right? And they can see exactly what's happening in real time. Of course, this enables, better uptime of their facilities, for water and power. Of course, their customers then are more satisfied, as they might not experience a water shortage or an outage, and so forth. So I think that's one good example. Another one I can think of is on the flip side of the weather patterns is a drought situation, and the utility here is Sabesp. They're in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, and I believe they're the largest water wastewater utility in the Southern Hemisphere. They provide water wastewater services to about 28 million people. A few years ago, they had severe drought issues. And one of the challenges that they faced was figuring out where to deliver water and when, given the lack of resources. And because of all that, the customer satisfaction ratings were actually very low for them. It was difficult for them to inform their customers if there was going to be even water available. So, water got so low to the point where they did have to shut off water. So what they did was they leveraged our technologies to basically monitor things in real time or near real time to figure out exactly where to deliver the water when, the water available in the various regions. And they actually posted this information online. So being much more transparent and open with their customers, giving that feedback as opposed to having customers that might be upset or might be surprised and having to basically call into their call center, right? So, having that outreach was really important. So they got to the point where they were able to inform their customers, and definitely they needed to turn off the water at times, but they let people know in advance. At the same time, they were able to improve their energy efficiency. So they knew exactly, for example, some of the power rates, because they have some time of use rates, the performance of their pumps, for example, in their various pumping stations, and they were able to deliver water where needed as efficiently as possible. So during that, they actually increased their customer satisfaction rates by greater than 20%. And at the same time, they reduced their energy consumption by about 9%. So all in all, a fantastic story. And that's all about the power of data and using that to transform it into actionable information early.
But what about the growing climate-related threat of toxic algae? How can data and artificial intelligence, or AI, keep those toxins out of the public water supplies?
Because of the climate changing, we're starting to see more extreme temperatures. The water supplies, where we get our drinking water, whether it's a lake or rivers, it's just starting to warm up. And because of that warming of the water, we're seeing these issues with algal blooms. And unfortunately, in some of those situations, the algae can create cyanotoxins. And the bacteria creating these toxins is definitely harmful to us. And I can think of the city of Salem, where they ran into this issue a couple of years ago. And it got to the point where they actually had to issue a boil water advisory. And that's something that they never wanted to experience again. So they said, what can we do to anticipate this or to mitigate the risk? So, leveraging our some of our technologies, they're able to now basically forecast 2 weeks into the future to see, one, what's the odds and what are the probabilities of getting algal blooms. And then two, if there are going to be cyanotoxins. So those harmful algae blooms is what they want to predict. So they take a lot of data from about 8 different sources, including the weather data. They measure things like dissolved oxygen, temperature of the water, turbidity. They've got basically this pontoon that sits out in their lake, and it measures, I think, at various depths, about 8 different parameters. And with that, they bring that data up into the cloud, and they're working with the local university to use artificial intelligence to then go through that data to make these predictions. So it's a great story about having, the Internet of Things tied to artificial intelligence that allows them to make these kinds of predictions. So it's been very successful. They basically can predict 2 weeks into the future, and they post that information on their website as well. That way, people in the region can see exactly, what's going to happen. Are there going to be algal blooms? And if there's going to be, cyanotoxins, that allows people to be completely informed and aware. And what's great is now they have the ability to mitigate the risk, right? So if they see these issues about to happen or possibly happen, they can now start to look at the actual water process and, add more chlorination, for example. Or if there's going to be something that they just can't mitigate completely, the public's going to be aware, right? And they don't want to go back into a situation where, the public is surprised and, all of a sudden there's this last minute boil water advisory. So, and it's something like this can be leveraged anywhere in the world, right? It's very similar. And, we're just really starting to see more of these issues globally.
What should our engineering audience be thinking about in their work in terms of climate change and adapting their designs?
I think there's a couple of takeaways, when it comes to engineering. So they do a lot of design and build, of course, and of course throughout the whole life cycle, operate and maintain as well. And they definitely need, data and information. So first of all, I'd say, engineering firms and engineers really need to look for a strong digital partner, organizations that understand the industry and also how digital transformation works and the value that can be obtained from that. Another is we need to have more sensors out in some of these areas. Some of these places can be fairly remote. So having sensors, but also very importantly is the software around managing that data and providing the analytics, the visualization to make those smarter decisions. One of the biggest challenges that not only our customers, but a lot of these engineering firms and people who work in, not only just the water industry, but all industries, is that there's so much data out there nowadays. Sometimes we hear that they have too much data. Well, we at Aviva feel that there's no such thing as having too much data. It's being really able to manage that data, to start making sense and use of it. So that's something that's really important, is to be able to manage that data, provide that context around it, so that we can drive those smarter decisions, based on data and information. And lastly, I think we can do a lot more with the data, not only by managing it better, but by sharing that data amongst other stakeholders. I always like to talk about, what's that value chain of your business? And this, today we're talking about water, for example. But if you look at smart cities, which is part of our infrastructure and data centers and all these buildings, there's a lot of stakeholders that are involved. And I believe that we really need to look at the value chain of your industry and also the value chain of data. How can that data be shared amongst various stakeholders to benefit from that information? One example is, for example, the whole energy water nexus. We're seeing more and more reliance on electricity and the electric grid. Just look at the number of cars now that are going electric, for example. There's a huge demand on the grid. At the same time, if you take a look at water, water is typically the single largest consumer of power in any city. So the other aspect is buildings in these cities, right? Huge consumers of power. And we have the ability to basically, I think, share that data amongst these various stakeholders to, reduce or shift our electric load, for example. And we can do that quite easily with water because we can store water. So storing water is like storing power. And if we are able to share this information much more easily and readily, I think we can really, mitigate and adapt to some of these climate changes and challenges that we're seeing.